Welcome to God's Word Unmasked. In this opening segment, we introduce viewers to the journey they are about to embark on, a deep dive into the hidden mysteries of biblical history. The focus today is on the Nephilim, a group that has long intrigued scholars, theologians, and spiritual seekers. These mysterious beings are said to be the offspring of fallen angels and human women, and their presence plays a pivotal role in the events leading up to God's decision to flood the earth as described in the Book of Genesis. The Nephilim are not merely mythical figures. They represent a significant force of corruption and rebellion against God's divine order. Their influence is felt throughout ancient times, as they disrupted human life and led to a period of great wickedness on earth. By diving into this topic, we uncover the reasons behind their existence, their impact on humanity, and the monumental decision by God to cleanse the earth with the flood. But despite the floodwaters' supposed total destruction, there are biblical clues that suggest the Nephilim might have somehow survived. This is the mystery we are here to explore. Purpose. The aim of this discussion is to peel back the layers of mystery surrounding how the Nephilim might have survived the flood. Were they completely eradicated, or did they manage to persist in some way? By examining various theories and biblical references, we'll attempt to answer this fascinating question and uncover hidden truths from ancient texts. Call to action. For viewers who want to gain a full understanding of the Nephilim, it's essential to start from the beginning. We recommend you watch parts 1 and 2 of the Book of Giants series, which delve deeply into the origin of the Nephilim and their connection to the fallen angels. These episodes will provide you with a foundation for understanding how the Nephilim fit into God's grand design and biblical history, setting the stage for today's discussion. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more enlightening explorations into the hidden dimensions of the Bible. The Nephilim are a mysterious and intriguing group mentioned in Genesis 6:1-4 of the Bible, described as the offspring of fallen angels and human women. Their origins stem from the sons of God, believed to be fallen angels, who took human wives, resulting in the birth of the Nephilim. These beings are often interpreted as giants or mighty warriors, referred to as heroes of old, men of renown. The nature of the Nephilim. The Nephilim were not ordinary humans. Their birth from fallen angels and human women is seen as a violation of the natural order. In ancient Jewish texts, particularly the Book of Enoch, the fallen angels, known as the Watchers, taught humanity forbidden knowledge, leading to widespread corruption. The Nephilim, as their offspring, embodied this corruption, combining supernatural power with human rebellion. Corruption of humanity. The existence of the Nephilim played a significant role in humanity's moral and spiritual decline. As beings with immense physical strength and supernatural attributes, they dominated the earth and contributed to widespread violence and chaos. Their influence was so pervasive that the Bible highlights them as one of the primary reasons for God's decision to flood the earth. Humanity, under the influence of the Nephilim and the fallen angels, had become increasingly wicked, filled with evil intentions and actions. God's judgment and the flood. The role of the Nephilim in humanity's corruption reached its peak just before the Great Flood. Genesis 6:5-7 explains that God saw the great wickedness of humans and regretted creating them. The presence of the Nephilim, along with the influence of the fallen angels, is directly tied to this moral degradation. As a result, God determined to cleanse the earth with the flood, sparing only Noah, his family, and the animals aboard the ark. Nephilim before and after the flood, Genesis 6:4. Genesis 6:4 contains an interesting detail. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. This suggests that the Nephilim were present both before and after the flood. While the flood was meant to wipe out all corrupt beings, the mention of Nephilim afterward raises questions about how they may have reappeared later in biblical history, especially when Israelite spies reported seeing giants in the land of Canaan during Moses' time, Numbers 13:33. In summary, the Nephilim were a hybrid race of giants, born from the union of fallen angels and human women. They were a major contributing factor to the wickedness of humanity, prompting God's judgment through the flood. Their influence persisted both before and after the flood, continuing to impact biblical history through their presence in Canaan. This mysterious group remains a topic of great intrigue and speculation, as their existence highlights the battle between divine and human corruption and how it shaped early biblical events. The second flood, God's judgment. The corruption of humanity and the Nephilim's influence before the flood, humanity's wickedness reached extreme levels. The Nephilim, the offspring of fallen angels and human women, Genesis 6:1-4, played a significant role in this corruption. These giants not only physically dominated the earth, but also morally influenced humankind, leading to widespread violence, immorality, and rebellion against God. The Nephilim are described as heroes of old, men of renown, but their influence was destructive. They spread chaos, and their presence was seen as a direct challenge to the natural order God had established. As humanity continued to stray further from God's will, their evil actions caused deep grief in the heart of the Creator. Genesis 6:6 notes, "The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled." This sorrow wasn't because God made a mistake, but reflected his heartbreak over how far his creation had fallen. The actions of humans, heavily influenced by the Nephilim, were so vile that the earth was filled with violence and corruption. Genesis 6:11-12. This rebellion, driven by humanity's disobedience and the Nephilim's presence, left God with no choice but to cleanse the earth. God, in his justice and mercy, decided to bring about a catastrophic judgment, a flood that would wipe out all life except for a remnant. This decision was an act of divine intervention to stop the spread of evil and to reset creation. The flood was not merely a punishment, but a necessary measure to restore purity to the world. Noah's righteousness and the ark. Amid this widespread wickedness, Noah stood out as the last righteous man on earth. Genesis 6:9 describes him as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Despite the overwhelming sin around him, Noah remained steadfast in his devotion to God, a stark contrast to the Nephilim and the corrupt society that had descended into chaos. God saw Noah's faithfulness and chose him to be the instrument through which humanity would be preserved. God commanded Noah to build an ark, a massive structure designed to house his family and pairs of every kind of animal. This ark symbolized God's mercy and his plan for salvation amid judgment. While the rest of humanity faced destruction, Noah's obedience to God's instructions ensured the survival of his family and the preservation of animal life. Noah's faith and diligence in building the ark, despite the ridicule and disbelief of others, demonstrated his deep trust in God's plan. Once the ark was complete, God caused the flood to come upon the earth. For 40 days and 40 nights, torrential rains fell, and the waters rose until they covered even the highest mountains. Every living thing that was not on the ark perished in the floodwaters. This total destruction marked the end of the corrupt generation that had been led astray by the Nephilim and humanity's unchecked sin. Only Noah, his family, and the animals aboard the ark were spared, making them the seeds of a new beginning for the earth. The flood was a turning point in biblical history, showcasing God's righteous judgment but also his mercy. Through Noah, God provided a way of salvation, a theme that would be repeated throughout the Bible. The story of the flood highlights both the seriousness of sin and the incredible power of God's grace. Noah's faithfulness and God's protection of him serve as enduring reminders of the importance of righteousness and obedience to God's will. Third post-flood reappearance of the Nephilim. Nephilim sightings. After the flood. After the flood, the Bible records the reappearance of the Nephilim, particularly in the land of Canaan. One of the most significant references comes from Numbers 13:33, where the Israelite spies report seeing giants, the descendants of Anak, during their exploration of Canaan. They describe themselves as mere grasshoppers in comparison to these towering figures, calling them Nephilim, the same word used before the flood. This mention raises an intriguing question. If the flood wiped out all life on earth except for Noah's family and the animals on the ark, how did these Nephilim reappear? The flood was described as a comprehensive destruction, eliminating all forms of corrupted life, including the wicked offspring of the fallen angels. The presence of Nephilim after the flood, therefore, suggests some mystery surrounding their survival or reappearance. Theories on how the Nephilim survived. Two primary theories have emerged to explain how the Nephilim may have survived the flood. Theory 1. A Nephilim secretly boarded or clung to the ark. One theory suggests that a Nephilim or multiple Nephilim somehow survived by sneaking aboard the ark or clinging to its exterior. Proponents of this theory argue that while the Bible describes Noah and his family as righteous, it doesn't explicitly exclude the possibility of additional stowaways. Some believe that a giant could have hidden within the ark or latched onto the structure in some supernatural manner. This theory, however, lacks direct biblical support and remains speculative, as the Genesis account is clear that only Noah's family and the animals were saved. Theory 2. New Nephilim were created. Post-flood by a second group of fallen angels. Another theory posits that a second group of fallen angels descended after the flood to once again mate with human women, producing a new generation of Nephilim. This theory builds on the idea that the rebellious nature of the fallen angels wasn't limited to the pre-flood era. Some suggest that despite the severe judgment on the original watchers, as described in the Book of Enoch, another group could have repeated their sin after the flood, resulting in the resurgence of the Nephilim. This theory, while appealing in its simplicity, encounters theological challenges. The severe punishment meted out to the original fallen angels, being bound in chains in the abyss until Judgment Day, would have likely served as a warning to other heavenly beings, discouraging them from repeating the same rebellion. Moreover, the Bible doesn't provide evidence of another angelic rebellion after the flood, making this explanation more speculative and dependent on interpretations outside the core biblical text. In both theories, the mystery of the Nephilim's post-flood survival points to a deeper and more complex narrative about the spiritual forces at work during this period in biblical history. These giants, connected to the fallen angels, re-emerge in the land of Canaan, posing a significant threat to God's people, and further fueling theological debate about their origins and significance. Fourth, genetics and the return of the Nephilim. The role of genetics in the reappearance of giants. The reappearance of giants after the flood, despite God's intent to destroy the Nephilim through the deluge, raises significant questions. One plausible explanation revolves around genetics, particularly the idea that Nephilim traits, such as gigantism, were passed down through Noah's lineage. Introduction to the genetic theory. The concept of genetic inheritance suggests that traits can skip generations and resurface later. In the case of the Nephilim, their unique characteristics, such as physical gigantism, could have been carried in a recessive form through Noah's family. This could explain why giants were spotted in Canaan generations after the flood, Numbers 13:33. Recessive genetic traits. Recessive traits are those that can lie dormant in a family line and resurface under the right genetic conditions. In this theory, one of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, or Japheth, or their wives, could have carried a dormant Nephilim gene from their ancestors. This gene may have been passed on in a recessive form, remaining hidden for generations until it reappeared in certain descendants, particularly in the form of giants. Ham's lineage and the curse of Canaan, Noah's sons, repopulating the earth. After the flood, Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, were responsible for repopulating the earth. Each of these sons became the progenitor of various nations, and biblical genealogies trace many ancient civilizations back to them. Ham's descendants, in particular, became associated with some of the ancient world's most rebellious and idolatrous nations, including Canaan. The curse of Canaan. Ham's son, Canaan, was cursed by Noah after Ham dishonored his father, Genesis 9:20-25. This curse, though placed on Canaan specifically and not Ham's other descendants, marked Canaan's lineage for trouble and struggle. The presence of giants among Canaan's descendants is considered part of this curse. Many scholars see a connection between this curse and the Nephilim traits re-emerging in the Canaanites. Giants among the Canaanites. The Bible references giants living among the descendants of Canaan, particularly the Anakim, Rephaim, and other tribes known for their size and strength. Deuteronomy 2:10-11, Joshua 11:21-22. The most famous of these giants is Goliath, the Philistine warrior defeated by David. These giants may have carried the recessive Nephilim gene passed down from Ham's lineage. The genetic mutation theory and Nephilim traits. The genetic mutation theory offers an intriguing explanation for how the Nephilim traits reappeared, despite the apparent destruction of all Nephilim during the flood. If Ham or his wife carried the Nephilim genetic mutation, this trait could have been passed down to his descendants, eventually resurfacing in the form of the giants of Canaan. Recessive traits. Resurfacing. The re-emergence of Nephilim traits, like gigantism, through recessive genetics provides a biological explanation for the giants seen in Canaan. It suggests that while Noah's family was chosen for survival, they may have unknowingly carried the Nephilim gene within their bloodline, leading to the reappearance of giants in future generations. This genetic framework adds a layer of complexity to understanding the Nephilim's presence post-flood and suggests that divine judgment, while swift and comprehensive, may not have fully eradicated the lingering effects of their corruption. Instead, these traits may have persisted, buried in the genetic code, waiting for the right conditions to bring them back into the world through the descendants of Ham, particularly in the Canaanite lineage. V. Biblical references to giants in Canaan. The giants in Canaan and God's commands, the Israelite spies report, Numbers 13:33. When the Israelites reached the border of Canaan, Moses sent 12 spies to scout the land. Upon returning, 10 of the spies reported seeing formidable giants, referred to as the descendants of Anak. These giants were described as towering figures that made the Israelites feel like grasshoppers in comparison. This imagery paints a vivid picture of the physical and psychological fear the Israelites experienced. The spies' account not only emphasized the physical size of these giants, but also their influence over the land, which caused the Israelites to doubt their ability to conquer Canaan. This event set the stage for the people's initial reluctance to enter the Promised Land, reflecting both the presence and the intimidation factor of the giants in the biblical narrative. God's command to destroy the Canaanites, Deuteronomy 7:1-2. In response to the corrupt and idolatrous practices in Canaan, God gave the Israelites a direct command. They were to utterly destroy the Canaanite nations, including the giants, to prevent the spread of idolatry and immorality. This was not merely a territorial conquest, but a spiritual cleansing. God's intent was to rid the land of the pervasive evil that had taken root. influenced in part by the Nephilim and their descendants. The instruction to destroy these nations highlights the severity of the threat they pose to the spiritual purity of Israel. It was essential for the Israelites to remove all traces of the Canaanites' practices to establish a holy, God-centered nation in the Promised Land. Canaanite nations and their giants' connection to the Nephilim. The giants encountered by the Israelites were believed to be descendants of the Nephilim, the offspring of fallen angels and human women, mentioned in Genesis 6. Though the flood was intended to wipe out the Nephilim, it appears that remnants of their genetic traits persisted in the post-flood world, particularly in the lineages of the Canaanites. This explains the presence of giants like the Anakim, Rephaim, and other formidable peoples within the Canaanite nations. The giants represented more than just physical threats. They symbolized the lingering corruption and rebellion against God that the Nephilim had initiated, making their eradication essential to the Israelites' spiritual journey. God's purpose in destroying the Canaanites. God's call for the destruction of the Canaanite nations was a protective measure. The Canaanites had indulged in extreme forms of idolatry, immorality, and even child sacrifice, practices that could severely influence and corrupt the Israelites if left unchecked. By commanding the Israelites to remove these nations, God was preserving the spiritual integrity of his chosen people and ensuring that the Promised Land would be free from the demonic influences tied to the giants and their lineage. The giants' presence in the Canaanite nations served as a reminder of the ancient rebellion against God, making their destruction not just a physical necessity, but a spiritual mandate. God's aim was to cleanse the land, allowing the Israelites to build a nation rooted in his holiness, away from the corruption that giants and their Canaanite counterparts embodied. In summary, the giants in Canaan played a significant role in biblical history, representing both a physical and spiritual threat. God's command to the Israelites to destroy them was part of a larger plan to ensure the spiritual purity of his people and to rid the Promised Land of the deep-rooted corruption left by the Nephilim. The giants stood as symbols of the lingering rebellion against God, making their elimination crucial for the establishment of a holy nation. 6. Theological and genetic interpretations. 1. The Book of Enoch's view on fallen angels. The Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text, provides deeper insight into the story of the fallen angels, known as the Watchers. These angels descended to earth during the time of Jared, taking human wives and producing offspring known as the Nephilim, or giants. This act of rebellion against God's natural order was met with severe consequences. The fallen angels taught humanity forbidden knowledge, including advanced technology, sorcery, and the arts of war, leading to widespread moral and spiritual corruption. God's response to this rebellion was swift and decisive. According to the Book of Enoch, he imprisoned the fallen angels in a subterranean abyss, binding them until the final judgment. This punishment was so extreme that it served as a warning to any other angels considering similar disobedience. The severity of their fate was meant to ensure that no other angelic beings would dare to follow in their footsteps, making it unlikely that another group of angels descended to earth after the flood to repeat the same transgression. This explains why there is no mention of additional fallen angels creating more Nephilim after the flood. 2. How Nephilim traits may have resurfaced. Despite the destruction of the Nephilim in the flood, biblical texts like Numbers 13:33 describe the reappearance of giants in Canaan, raising questions about how these beings survived. A possible explanation lies in genetics, particularly in the idea that Nephilim traits could have been passed down through Noah's descendants. The concept of recessive traits provides a scientific lens through which to view the re-emergence of giants. If any of Noah's sons, or more likely their wives, carried dormant Nephilim genes, these traits could resurface in later generations. Recessive genetic traits can remain hidden for generations until both parents carry the trait, resulting in offspring who express these characteristics. In this case, the gigantism associated with the Nephilim may have been passed down through one of Noah's family lines, particularly the line of Ham, which later produced the Canaanites. 3. The implications of these traits on the giants seen in Canaan. The presence of giants in Canaan, as seen by the Israelite spies in Numbers 13:33, could be the result of the Nephilim gene resurfacing within the population. The giants, referred to as the sons of Anak, were feared for their great size and strength, traits reminiscent of the original Nephilim. This genetic inheritance could explain why these beings appeared in Canaan, despite the flood's supposed destruction of all life outside of Noah's Ark. Furthermore, the descendants of Ham, specifically through Canaan, were linked to many of the tribes that the Israelites were commanded to defeat during their conquest of the Promised Land. These giants in Canaan were seen as a physical and spiritual threat, tied to the corrupted lineage that had once plagued the pre-flood world. The survival of Nephilim traits in Canaan served as a reminder of the lasting consequences of the fallen angels' rebellion and the importance of purging such corrupting influences from the land. In summary, this section ties together theological insights from the Book of Enoch with genetic possibilities to explain how Nephilim traits could have resurfaced after the flood, leading to the giants seen in the land of Canaan. This blend of spiritual and genetic interpretation deepens the understanding of the biblical narrative, showing how the legacy of the fallen angels endured through human history. 7th conclusion, recap of how the Nephilim survived. In this section, we'll revisit the fascinating narrative of the Nephilim and their mysterious survival after the Great Flood. The primary explanation hinges on the concept of genetic inheritance. We will delve into the idea that the Nephilim, often depicted as giants and offspring of the sons of God and the daughters of men, may have survived through the lineage of Ham, one of Noah's sons. This discussion will highlight how Ham's descendants, particularly the Canaanites, could embody traits or characteristics linked to the Nephilim, thus perpetuating their legacy beyond the flood. We will explore biblical texts and genealogies to illustrate this point, shedding light on how these ancient beings may have influenced later generations. Final thoughts on the mystery of the Nephilim. As we wrap up this exploration, it's important to reflect on the broader theological implications of the Nephilim narrative. The existence of the Nephilim raises profound questions about divine judgment, human nature, and the consequences of transgressions. We will consider how their story intertwines with themes of rebellion against God and the complexities of good versus evil. This reflection will encourage viewers to think critically about the mysteries presented in Scripture and their relevance to contemporary spiritual discussions. Call to action. To foster an engaged community around these captivating biblical topics, we encourage viewers to take part in the conversation. Please like this video if you found it insightful, share your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of biblical mysteries. Your participation helps us delve deeper into these fascinating narratives together. Preview of the next video. As we look ahead, our next video will delve into the curse of Canaan and its significant implications for biblical history. We will examine the origin of this curse, its effects on the descendants of Ham, and how it shaped the socio-political landscape of ancient Israel. Join us as we uncover more layers of this intriguing biblical narrative.